She's a little girl, DJ.
She's a girl. Well, here we go. Back to it. We've got a couple of odds and ends here that I've worked out over the years that make it a little bit easier when you're doing these inside projects like this. I know that these kinds of projects can make a heck of a mess if you're doing them inside your house, and you can get a lot of complaints from that. So what I've got is a little fold-up table that I do most of my stuff on, and I've covered it with a towel. The reason for the towel being here is it keeps things from sliding around too much on the table, because the table is made out of a plastic. Now, as a cutting surface, I went down to one of these dollar stores and I picked up a cutting board. This is a cheapo cutting board. I think this one here cost me $1, and it's made of some kind of plastic, but it works great. It's just a butcher kind of a cutting board, and you can do things to it like that, and boy, it just doesn't show any marks at all, hardly. Well, I'll make a mark on it. Now I feel better. There you go. So this is what I work on. I do a lot of my cutting on that, and that helps me to stop from cutting the towel I've got. Now, when you're working with Kydex, you need to make a form of some kind, a pattern. And one of the best cardboards that I've found is this stuff here. It's just a file folder. Buy a box of these babies, and this kind of plastic, I'm sorry, paper. This kind of paper here is real good for forms. And we'll just go ahead and get started here. What I'll do, well, I don't want to use that one. I'll use this one here. I like the way this one opens. I'll just go ahead and slice it off. So I'm only working with a part of it. Now what I want to do is I want to make a little sheath for this knife here. This is a Furman Cold Fury blade, and although I have a leather sheath for it, I really want to make a nice Kydex sheath that's good and strong and will protect me should I ever decide to fall on this blade. So I need to make some kind of a pattern. I have to decide what kind of a sheath I want to make, and that's where we're going to get started on the sheath. The way I usually start out with a sheath is I lay the knife out lengthwise on my cardboard that I'm going to be using for a pattern. And I've got the blade edge facing the edge of the paper, as you can see here, and it's in about 1 inch or so. And I've got about a ½ an inch or so from the tip to the edge of the paper. So the knife sits about like this. Now I'm just going to flip the knife over like that, and this gives me the other side of the sheath. And I'm going to come in with my pen up to the height I want the sheath to be, and then I'm going to go across like so to where the belt loop is going to be. Basically, that's all there is to the pattern. Now, this is going to be the inside of the plastic and the inside of the sheath. So I'm going to write, whoops, I took spelling when I was in school, inside on it, something like that. So now what we want to do is we want to cut it out. And this is where we grab our next tool, the scissor. Now don't worry if you don't do this exactly right. You know, we got a philosophy here. Good enough, close enough, well enough, all that kind of stuff. And Kydex is a very, very forgiving material. You can fix up the mistakes you make after you get the basic thing made. So this is our basic sheath pattern at this point. Now how's it going to work? I've got the blade facing to the outside here, not in towards the folded side. And there's a reason for that, which you'll see a little bit later. What I'm going to do is just fold this over like so. This is kind of how you test the pattern. And get that thing out of here. About like so. There we go. And that's how the sheath is going to kind of look. I'm going to bring it down. So let's see here. Down till it's about like that. And that's about how the sheath will work. This part here will fold over and create the belt loop. Now, I don't like the look of that. That's just pretty square. So what I'm going to do is try to figure out about where the blade is in here. And I can see that it's right there, and I need about a ½ an inch, a little bit more. So I'll go ahead and nip that off, like so. Fold it over. Match that nip. like this. Remember, you can correct all this stuff in the Kydex when you go to work. So now our sheath is going to look something like this. And that's all there is to it. Something else I ought to tell you about this little sheath here. It's going to be good and sturdy. It's going to hold this knife very well. But I really don't like the look of Kydex all that much. There's some beautiful Kydex sheaths out there, but it's so military looking. So what I'm going to do after we get done making this Kydex sheath is we're going to cover it with leather. And that's something that I do with just about all of my knives. The Kydex is a good, sturdy, almost penetration-proof material to form the outside of the sheath, and then the leather gives it that woodsy look. So we're going to cover this with leather after we get done. But there we go. That's the basics of it. Now all I have to do is form this out of Kydex. So let's go to the next step. I cut a piece of that Kydex off the roll, and you can see it's got a little bit of a curl to it. And I don't like to work with curls like that, so I'm just going to hit it with the heat gun a little bit to kind of bring it down. So we'll just blow for a while. Okay, that's flat enough for me. Now I've got to go ahead and turn this into my sheath. We have the pattern that we cut, and remember I wrote inside. Well, the shiny part of the Kydex is going to be the inside. I always do it that way because it's easier on the knife, and the rougher side out there is better for gluing your leather to it. So I'm just going to go ahead and back this up there. In fact, I'm going to leave a little extra length on the portion here that's going to go over my belt just in case I want some more. It's hard to add it, but it's easy to leave it on when I'm cutting. And I'll go ahead and mark off my pattern, like so. Now that I've got a pattern on there and I can barely see it, I'll go ahead and start cutting it. Now Kydex can be cut a lot of different ways. You can cut it with a knife, as I've been doing, or you can use a pair of scissors or a pair of side cutters. These are tin snips. Either way, it'll cut it pretty well. All right, I'm just going to use my knife here. Once you cut it, you can kind of tear the stuff like so. There it is. Simple as that. Now we're ready to start assembling our blade, our sheath. The pattern I made now that you saw me make was for a left carry sheath. And what that means is this. The edge faces towards the rear of your body. So if I fold it like this and I put it on my body, it'll hang with the rear facing, with the edge facing to the rear of my body. Now if I want to carry it on the right side, you see how I marked this? This is marked inside, there you go, inside left. If I want to carry it on the right side, just flip it over. And this would be the inside of the right side carry. So the sheath would then go together in this manner, and with the edge towards the rear, it would fold over like so, with the blade towards the rear. So this one pattern could make either left or right side carry sheaths, depending on what you have, as long as you have it identified for the inside of the Kydex. So I made two different blanks here off that same pattern. This one here would be for the right side carry, and this one here for the left side carry. Let's go ahead and make the right side carry so we can see what she looks like. Now, I've got this thing just about all ready to go here, and you can see I've got the approximate position for the blade when I put it in here. But something you need to know, when this plastic folds over onto this and starts to hook on, it has a tendency to stick. And the way you beat that is this. This is some of that non-stick cooking stuff, brand name, and you can use any kind you want. But what I usually do is I take my blade or whatever it is that I'm spraying. Let me get my glasses out of here, or I'll be looking through a bubbled universe. I just spray a little bit of this stuff on there to kind of keep the plastic from sticking to it. That helps a little bit. Now that's quite a little bit on there, and I always put a little extra on it, and then come back and wipe it off lightly. I don't need too much on there, and I don't want to goop everything up, but just enough of a coating so the plastic won't stick to the blade. And that's how it's going to go. So the next step is to prepare for the heating. So let's go to that step. When you go to mold the Kydex, what I like to do is I like to have a kind of a padded surface down here, and it turns out that old towels work out pretty good. They're a little bit flexible, and they'll take up some of the shape of the knife. If I press down on it, it's going to take more of the shape of the knife as I push into the Kydex. I also keep available a little another little towel, a washcloth. So we might as well start heating it up. Now, by the way, one of the things you want to do is if you're working with a knife, or a gun for that matter, you don't want to heat the metal up before you need to. So I'll just set that aside, and we'll start heating the Kydex. The first thing to do is to heat the seam. That's the area where you're going to be folding over and the spine of the knife is going to be resting. So that'll be right in this area here. So that'll be our first area to heat. Then we're going to fold it over, and then we're actually going to try to mold it to the shape of the blade itself. You all ready? You want to play the heat gun back and forth so you heat the whole thing evenly. Remember, it's pretty hot, and you can get a fire started on your terry cloth if you're not careful. At this point, what we're trying to do is just to press the knife into the plastic where we think we want it to be. I want it about like that. And this way it gives me a chance to check to see if the location is right. Now, the coolness of the blade is going to help to cool the Kydex a little bit faster. And I like to keep a little bit of pressure on here. When professionals do it, they have special rubber things that they use to press down on it, and that keeps a lot of pressure on the Kydex while it forms to the blade. And I'm actually going to be using the tightness of the Kydex on the blade to hold the blade in place. But right there is a serviceable sheath. Of course, we're far from being done. And you can see it didn't exactly line up on the edges. That doesn't make any difference. That's why we cut so much extra material. The next thing we're going to do now is, now that it's sort of in place, is I'm going to heat up the surface of this and try to get a little bit more conformation with the blade itself. So we'll heat that up, and to do that I'm going to remove the blade once again. Now, things may move around on you a little bit, so don't let that worry you. You can always fix it up in, as we call it, post-production. Every once in a while you can poke it with your finger to see if it's getting soft. If you don't do it for a long time, you don't linger on it, it won't hurt you. That looks like it's pretty soft. We're ready. Woo! There goes the heat gun. There we go. That's about how we wanted it. Now the only thing that I didn't do, I didn't get done quite right, is I didn't put my my heat gun down safely. It fell off the edge of the table, but things happen. There we go. Now that's good and tight. Now you may be able to barely make out the outline of the blade. It's right in here, right in this area here. So, with that in place, now what we're going to do is we're going to do a little carving. We're going to cut around the outside of this and make this sheath into something that's a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. Now that we've got it shaped, what I want to do is find out about where the tip falls, and looks like it just about where we wanted. So I'm going to go down here a little ways, and I'm going to mark about where I think I may want to end our sheath. Now I know that the knife is right in this area here, and I want about a half or so of an inch out from the edge of the blade for the final sheath. So I'm just going to come up and cut this about like that on a little line that goes about like this and about like that, which is about how the blade is shaped. To do that, we're going to use our tin snips, but the knife comes out first. So we'll just get in here. Now this stuff is tough. You can try this with a knife, but probably be at it for a while. There we go. It's nice to have a strong table so when you're pressing down it doesn't collapse everything into your lap, especially if you got knives and stuff there. There we go. So there's a rough outline of the sheath. And what I'm going to do is just trim it up a little bit. Now remember, this is going to be covered with leather, so we don't have to worry too much about the beauty of the thing. This is not a beautiful thing. It's just supposed to be functional and try to keep the blade from whacking you in the leg. So, whoop, looky there, got a little crook. How do we fix that? Heat. So we're going to put a little bit more heat on this thing now, and we're going to do a little straightening. There we go. You notice I'm just using a little pen to hold this down. You can hold it down with just about anything but your fingertip. There we go. And that's straight enough. Now what I want to do is make certain that not only does the sheath keep the blade away from my skin, but it also helps to retain the blade in the sheath. And to do that, I'm going to bend this little tab here over just a little bit above the guard, this portion here on the blade. So I'm just going to heat that up a little bit and press it down. That's about it. Now we just have to wait for it to cool off a bit. It still looks pretty shoddy, But don't worry about that, because sandpaper, grinding, and that kind of thing could fix it up. If you wanted to use just the Kydex as a sheath, you've probably got something that's functional now. There we go. So now we've got a little bit of a tab here holding that in. And as soon as this cools off even a little bit more, it's going to hold it nice and tight. And that's about how she goes together. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to make sure that this is a little bit smoother than what we've got. So I'll take out some sandpaper, remove the knife. It's not a good idea to have your blade slip out of the sheath and cut your fingers while you're working on your sheath. Fast and dirty, folks. There we go. This stuff is like a stray dog. Cleans up real good. There we go. There it is. Now, if you want to put a little bit more tension in this thing, you can put some rivets in along the extra spacing here that you left on the side. The kind of rivets that I like to use are pop rivets. Let me show you a little bit about those. The next thing we want to do is a couple of little things for the future. One of those things for the future is to drill a hole. This is about an 1/8 inch hole. Right through the tip of the sheath. That's to allow water to drain out. If you get water or sand in there, there's a tendency for it to collect. And if you leave like a little drain hole in there, it helps out. You can put a larger hole in there if you'd like to. Now I like to put a little reinforcement in the sheath by drilling a couple of extra holes like this. This keeps the sheath from splitting. Let me show you how. I drill some holes in here now, and what I want to do is put some pop rivets in through those holes like this. And the pop rivet is going to hold the two halves together. Now, one side of the rivet here has a flat area on it that's going to distribute the force. But the other side, when it swells out, isn't going to do much more than mushroom. So what I tend to do is push this through and then use a little washer on the back side. Boop, 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 boop. Like so. That way when it swells out, it'll tend to hold it a little bit better. Now if you haven't seen one before, this is a pop rivet gun, and what it does is it just fits over this little shaft, about like so. You hold it together, and then you squeeze like so. When you squeeze, it pulls the back side of the rivet in and swells it out so it locks, and at the same time breaks off the shaft. So now that's well attached. The shaft piece comes out. We'll do it again, like so. Pop another rivet washer on there. Pop it off. We got 2 in there. And then we'll go for number 3. Like so. Now this one is a little bit trickier because it's pretty tight, so I'm going to have to squeeze it together. Grunting is an important part of any kind of a construction project like this. There it goes. Ta-da! Now I've got three rivets in there, 3 washers on the back side so it won't pull through, and a small hole. Now that hole isn't big enough to drain, so I'm going to use a Chinese drill. Let's just take your drill and wiggle it around a little bit like that. This is a multi-sized drill that way. And there you are. Now that sheath is pretty solid. Might have to do a little expanding. There we go. Doesn't quite hold it in, but that's going to be taken care of by the string. Whoops. Looks like my rivet came off. Time for another rivet. How do we do that? Well, we take the old rivet out and we go for a longer rivet. This is just part of the joy of making this stuff, especially when you're making it faster. Let's see here. There's a nice size right here. I'll just stick this one through. Looks like I get to use the same washer again. I was afraid of this. There we go. There we go, I think. Yeah, that puppy held it. Now, when you get to this stage, you might find that wherever you melted it to fit something might be a little bit too tight. So, ta-da! Back to your blower. I'll pull the knife out. This is one of the beauties of these thermoplastics. You can continually readjust them until you get them the way you like them. Well, looky there, it peeled right up. There we go. About like so. Hold it down with my finger. I always like the pain. That's why I like backpacking and survival. I like the pain. Okay, there it is. So now you can see we built ourselves a quickie sheath for our little knife, and it's in there pretty tight. There we go. That will loosen up over time. Now I think we need to put some leather on this thing and make it look good. You're probably wondering about this this belt loop goodie back here. Don't worry about that. We're going to do that after we put the leather on it. So let's go on to the next stage.